Hello and welcome to my channel. This video will focus on Midi Madness from Midi Madness software. Midi Madness is a MIDI focused plugin that generates MIDI notes and patterns where you set the guidelines. Midi Madness has a lot of functionality and flexibility. I'm going to go over the layout and try to keep this as short as possible. To get started, you have to have a digital audio workstation, or commonly termed DAW, to load Midi Madness. I'm using Bitwig, but there are a ton of other DAWs out there like Reaper, Live, Cubase, FL Studio, Studio One, etc., and that list barely scratches the surface. You will also need Midi Madness, which is easy to find on the internet. Just Google Midi Madness software. Please keep in mind that this is not a sponsored video. I paid for the software, and the views in this video are my own take on it and no one else's. In Bitwig, Midi Madness shows up under the synths list under Devices. Drag the name over to the track panel, and Bitwig will create a new track with that plugin. At the top on the left, I already have a track here with Midi Madness on it, and I'll open it up and talk a little bit about where everything is on the interface. This won't be a total review, but I need to go over a few things for those who are uninitiated with the plugin. So at the top is your preset box where you can recall presets and save them. Then there is a playback area, and in this area you can load in a synth. I won't be doing that in this video, but the plugin does allow that functionality for you to load in that synth for some of the DAWs out there that don't transmit MIDI all that easily. But in this section is also where you can change the mode that Midi Madness operates in, and we will be getting back to this later in the video. Initially, we're going to leave it in loop mode. And below that section are two other sections, and it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other. The top box is the sequence box, and this is where you'll get a little bit of that visual feedback. You have an area over to the left for storing up to 8 clips. You have the previous and next buttons below it, which will allow you to go backwards and forwards in time. You have the generate and regenerate buttons. And when you regenerate, you don't have to regenerate everything. Midi Madness will allow you to just do the CCs, the modulation, or the pitch bends, etc. You can adjust the loop length up in this section, and you don't even have to have it in bars if you don't want. You can uncheck bars, and Midi Madness will do everything according to the BPM. At the bottom section, you have the parameters that you use for generating the sequences. Each bar adjusts that note's chance of coming up in the sequence. So the chord that's selected below is from the C major scale, and it's just a C major chord or a C chord. You can select chords down here on the bottom, or you can select scales from the bottom as well. After that, you have velocity. I never change it really. I leave it at this curve. You have octave, where you can tell Midi Madness which octaves you want to produce notes in and the likelihood of those octaves occurring. Then you have the polyphonic stage. Right now we're set to 1. So when Midi Madness goes out, this is what you're going to get, what's visually available in the top box there is with that 1 selected. And then you can do length and adjust each type of note's chances of occurring when you hit the generate button. So with things set up the way they are now, I could hit generate a few times, and you can see that each time Midi Madness will put up something different in the box. If we were to hit the play button inside of Bitwig, I right now have addictive keys on another track with a note receiver plugin, and that note receiver is set up to receive information from Midi Madness right now. If we were to go ahead and unmute the addictive keys track and just hit the play button, nothing super special. I mean, it's nice, but we can do a lot more. So let's come back up here and look through things again. Let's say we were to take things out to 2 bars. So I'm going to come up here, I'm going to click in, and when you first do it, we haven't hit the generate button. So right now we're only looking at 1 bar's worth of information. I'm going to go ahead and generate 2 bars. And then just to show you how the sliders work and how they affect the sequence, we're going to change a few things. So I'm going to change the polyphony down here at the bottom, and I'm going to go up to 3 and sometimes 4 chords. And at the beginning here, instead of using a C major chord, I'm going to do a C major 7th. So that gets the B in the action. And then on the length, I'm going to put in the possibility of having rests. I'm going to take these 2 bars almost to the top, which is going to get rid of those little gaps in between, and the notes are almost going to touch each other. And I'm going to bring down the 8th note. I'm going to throw in a little bit of that 16th. Totally get rid of the quarter note altogether. I like the probabilities sit something like that. And I'll come back up and hit the generate again, and you'll see that we have 3 notes there: 4, 4, 4, 3, big gap in there. If we were to play it, generate it again. I'm going to slow the BPM up here down to 110, and we're going to make some further changes so that we don't spend a lot of time clicking through the buttons. I'm going to switch to another project I already have at hand, and I'm going to show you in that project where I ended up. So in this project here, we start off with Ace in the top spot, and Midi Madness has been set up to be 8 bars in length. On this one, this chevron up here is a chord, is a A minor 7th chord. The second chevron is an F minor chord, and you can generate these by just right-clicking up in that area, hitting Add Chord. And when you do, nothing is generated initially. You can come down and you can select chord or scale. Right here, I'll say E dominant 7th. And if I were to hit the generate button, you can see that from there on, it would be an E dominant 7th. Now I'm going to go back to this previous example, and I'm going to delete that chord. This clip already exists, and it's feeding into an ambient preset inside of Zebra. So let's see what it sounds like. It's basically the ambient sound for the track that was playing when the video first started. Now that's the first instance of Midi Madness. And once again, we're still in loop mode. And I have that feeding Zebra. Now down here in the second track, I have Ace, and I want a little bass to come out. So I have another instance of Midi Madness. This instance of Midi Madness is set up to do A minor and F minor, just like the first instance. But on this one, I've changed the polyphony down to mostly single notes with occasional 2 and 3 note chords coming out. So I want to listen to this by itself, and then we're going to add in the backing track. Now, it itself doesn't have to be anything special, and if it's not something that you're totally satisfied with, you can drag that clip over into your DAW, or you can just drop it right here in the clip section, and you can generate a new set of notes. Once again, the guidelines stay the same. The first 4 measures, or the first 4 bars, are A minor. The second set of 4 bars are F minor. I'm going to stop it again for a second. because that's not all that's going on. Let me close up that MIDI Madness. Now down here I have Microtonic, and it's a favorite of mine. The Microtonic track, though, is not really something that matched up well with the background that was going on. So what I did is I put in another routing device down here on the track below it, and I stuck in a drum machine, and I just dropped some samples in it. I'm going to keep the rhythm that's playing in Microtonic, but I want to use some different sounds. So instead of what was playing before, I thought these fit. And down here on the next Zebra track, I'm actually going to take the MIDI Madness information from the first track, the one that's feeding that ambient background track, and I'm going to put it in the phrase box. Now, just like in the previous video, I have set up phrase box with just a little pattern on the inside. I just hit the random button, and each one of these lanes is set to a different MIDI channel. So 1 is set to 1, 2 is set to 2, and so forth. I'm feeding phrase box into a channel filter, so I get to decide which channels are going to go into Zebra. And Zebra is just set up with a hit preset from the same preset pack that had that ambient background. So I'm going to include it in the mix. Now right now, I only have notes coming off of channel 4 and 5. So as they click up in here on 4 and 5, if there are a set of notes inside of MIDI Madness, then I'll get notes out of channels or lanes 4 and 5. To match this, I've set up a similar structure on the Obscurium track. And I'm going to unmute it right now. So that's 2 instances of MIDI Madness feeding everything at the moment, and basically coming up with the same sound that I had at the beginning of the video. And that is one way that I use MIDI Madness. Here's another. I'm going to take that same project and make a few changes. We're going to go into the Ace track, and in that track I have a MIDI controller set up. So let me bring over the MIDI Madness window, and you can see down here at the bottom, I'm moving some knobs. You can't see that I'm moving the knobs, but I'm moving some knobs on my MIDI controller, and basically have just mapped them to different sliders here in the window for notes. Okay, so to do it, it's very simple. Inside of Bitwig, you would take, if you have your plugin open, you take whatever it is that you want to map. So I'll move this a little bit, and you can see over here that the knob is turning for rest. So all I have to do, I'll delete that, clear controller assignment, and then I'm going to come back here and say map. I twist the knob over on my controller, and all of a sudden I have control of that through my controller. Where that's going to come into play is not actually in loop mode. One of the cooler things inside of MIDI Madness, it has the ability to play freestyle. Now in freestyle mode, it is still going to take your guidelines that you've set up at the bottom, but as it goes into each bar, it is randomly going to generate notes. Now, some happy accidents can happen. So what I like to do is I like to add an instrument track. And on that instrument track, I like to put an instance of one of the routing plugins, the note receiver. And I tell that note receiver, I'll take everything from the Ace track, because that's the one that's going to have all of the crazy stuff happening. The Zebra track is going to do the same thing every time around. And the information that I want is actually from MIDI Madness. Now in Bitwig, you also want to change your input for the track, I come down there and say MIDI Madness. I'm going to hit record. Now, there's a couple of issues I have with MIDI Madness. I'm going to mention one of them now. I'll mention the rest of them at the end of the clip. But one of the problems is inside of Bitwig. If you set the plugin to freestyle and you set Bitwig up to record, a lot of times it doesn't do it and it won't put out any notes. So you actually have to hit play and then press the record button for things to work. I think it's the bug inside the software. I sometimes have that same problem over in Live. So I think it's the plugin and not Bitwig. So in this instance, I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit play, and then I'm going to hit the record button, and then we're going to play around with the notes down here at the bottom to get different results. And we're going to record those results down here on this track. I'm going to stop things a little bit. Let's take a look at that MIDI track and blow it up a little bit. And we can see that there's no pattern repeating inside of that track. And you don't have to have things set up the way I did. You could set up MIDI Madness totally separately, totally differently, so that it isn't producing notes in so many different octaves. You could come inside of MIDI Madness and change the chords that are happening. You can have a chord change for each bar. You can have one chord set of notes running for the entire length. You can change the length of the bars. Now, the length can be changed dynamically. However, if you set up an automation track or you put it on a controller, you should know that if the window is open, you're going to have problems, and oftentimes the plugin will crash. Now, we're inside of Bitwig. Inside of Ableton Live, you can close the interface, and if you change the length of bars, you hear a clicking and a popping sound. You won't hear that in Bitwig. But both Live and Bitwig, MIDI Madness has a problem if that window is open and you dynamically change the loop length through automation. In addition to adding a mapped controller, you can take one of the modulators that are easy to add inside of Bitwig and put them and attach them to one of the parameters. So let's take that steps. I don't know if steps is the best one. Let's see. Let's see if steps is going to be it. Maybe steps will be it. So if we open up MIDI Madness again, and we were to take the parameter length, and I want to adjust this a little bit, so I'm gonna play with that so that it comes up there as a rest, and I'll click on the modulator, I'll click on the rest, and everything is set. Great. Now down here we have 16 steps, but I want those steps to happen a little bit slower than normal, so I'm gonna come down there and I'm put them 4. And then I'm going to say for the last little bit, I don't want any notes. So we're going to delete this. We'll leave that as record. We'll hit the play button. And what this is going to do is this is going to modulate the steps. And I don't know if you can see it clearly over here. Well, maybe if I get rid of the information side and I can pull that over. Yeah, that's good. Now I'm going to hit the play and we're going to record again. And this time, instead of seeing notes all the way across, well, let me just do it. And keep an eye on the MIDI Madness plugin, so you're less likely to get notes when that rest is all the way near the top. So let's open up that MIDI track again. I'm going to shut down MIDI Madness for just a moment. And we'll pull it up. And we see that a lot of notes were given right there. There is one that occurs right there, even though we told it to, we changed the probability. And we can see that right here at the end of the 8th bar, we get nothing. And all of the rest of the spaces, there's something. I'm not going to go any further than that. You can take those modulators and you can attach them to just about anything inside of MIDI Madness. But I don't want to leave the video without talking about a few things that could improve. One of the issues inside of Bitwig is that the preset select box, if you go to save a preset, for some reason, it's blacked out. So I'll show you what I mean. Let's say I take this preset and I want to save as. And I go to type in this box, everything comes out black. You see nothing. If you go back and highlight it, you can see that there was something there. I do know that Bitwig does use a different way of displaying its boxes. I think it uses Java in some format or some form, and that may be the difference because that particular issue does not exist in Reaper or Live. Everything appears correctly. So we'll chalk that one up to Bitwig being a little bit different. But one of the things I'd like to see in the next version of MIDI Madness, if there is a new version of MIDI Madness, is I'd like to see some indicator on these chevrons of which chords have been placed along this timeline. I'd like to see it there. I'd like to also see it down maybe in the select chord box to show me what chord I've already selected. That would be nice. In addition to that, I'd like to have the ability to freeze certain notes, either by clicking on them, drawing a lasso around them, so that way when I hit generate, I can keep parts that I liked. I like the ability to automate either between clips so I don't have to drag everything into the DAW. That would be a nice feature, or maybe the feature to automate the previous and next buttons. That would go a long way to changing things inside of MIDI Madness. But it is still one of my most used plugins. I really like it a lot. So even if none of that changes, or if there isn't another version of the plugin, I will continue to use it in its current state. For me, it's all about ease of use, flexibility, and value. Now, when I find an app that fills a gap and makes it easy to do what I want to do, then it has value to me. And I find MIDI Madness ticks that box. Listen, I hope you found something useful in this video. Please leave comments below and remember to like the video if you found it useful. And if you find that the content on this channel is content that you like, a subscription from you would be awesome. It really is the only way for me to know if something I do, I should continue doing. If you do subscribe, click that bell and tell a friend. And until next time, take care.